So real quick, two things before we get into today's video. Firstly, I was supposed to have my video on Sesshomaru's mother go up yesterday, but some personal stuff came up for the guy editing the video, and as a result, it'll be coming out Thursday instead. Sorry if you were looking forward to it, I'm hoping you still enjoy it when it comes out. Secondly, I have never been super happy using this avatar, and don't get me wrong, I do like it, but the static image on screen just kind of feels weird sometimes. And I'm gonna be perfectly honest, I don't really like being on camera all that much either. As such, I was looking for some kind of alternative, and if you came to yesterday's stream, you definitely saw me come up with one. So for the rest of the week, I'm gonna be testing things out a little bit and see how I feel about looking like, well, this instead. I'm pretty new to this sort of thing, so it's going to take a little bit of patience from you guys. I hope you guys don't mind, but I'm going to try and figure it out as best I can. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below, if you like it, if you don't like it, or what I can work on to make it a little bit better. I'm hoping this is a nice midpoint between my two normal methods, but with that all out of the way, let's get into the actual video. So episode 22 had a lot of really interesting things in it, from Setsuna's butterfly wings to Kinu's return, but the one thing that got my history brain really going was the name that Zero kept calling herself. Realistically, neither the girls nor Miroku should have known about her name in general, at least to my knowledge anyways, so what was the point of lying? Either way, the name that she chose to use was Otsuyu, which is interesting because Otsuyu is not only a yokai, but they're one whose story is heavily intertwined with a specific flower, the peony, which you might know under the name Kirinmaru. If you are excited to learn about this yokai and the story behind this name, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more, and of course you can check out the description down below for links to my Twitch, my Discord, or my Patreon if you're looking to be a more active member of the community, or just trying to support me a bit extra. You can also follow me on Twitter at AxelBeats, but with all of that being said, let's talk about Otsuyu. Now in Japan there are three stories known as the Nihon Sandai Kaidan. These are the three great ghost stories, including Okiku, the story of a cursed doll, Oiwa, the story of a man who poisons his wife so that he can marry another woman, and then he is haunted by her vengeful ghost until she kills him too, and Otsuyu. Otsuyu comes from the Botondoro, or in English the Peony Lantern, a romance horror piece which involves doing the hanky-panky with the dead and the consequences of loving a ghost. Now, much like many of the inspirations for Kirinmaru's group, this story also originates in China and didn't really come to Japan as a staple until the 1600s. Interestingly enough, when it was brought over, it actually changed the whole meaning behind the story. The story begins on the first night of Obon, a Buddhist tradition which commemorates your ancestors, and during this period it's said that their spirits return to the world and can visit their relatives. A man named Ogiwara Shinojo had recently lost his wife, and one night he saw a light in the distance approaching his home. As it came closer and closer, he eventually could make out a woman holding a lantern decorated with peonies, and another woman that he thought to be the most beautiful he had ever seen. Her name was Otsuyu, and the woman holding the lantern was apparently her servant. He invited Otsuyu into his home, where they went at it like rabbits. However, just before dawn, she had to leave. The next night, however, Otsuyu would return, and again they did the do. This continued for 20 days. He fell in love, began to not leave his house in case she might show up, and he stopped taking care of himself. It got to the point where his neighbors began to worry about him. One night they went to check things out and caught a glance of them doing the old lust and thrust, only to be disgusted by what they saw. Otsuyu was a decomposing corpse, basically just a skeleton at this point. The next morning the neighbor confronted Shinojo about it and warned him that if this continued, Otsuyu would slowly steal his life. Shinojo remembered Otsuyu mentioning that she lived near a certain temple and went to investigate, finding a peony lantern resting on Otsuyu's grave. He tells a nearby priest about what happened and was given a spirit-repelling charm to place outside his house. Once he set it up, Otsuyu stopped coming to his home. However, he was in love with her, and her absence led him to depression and drinking. He drunkenly stumbled to her grave one night, and she appeared in front of it. Here, much like he invited her into his home on the first night they met, she invited him into hers, and he accepted. Days passed, and Shinojo hadn't been seen. His neighbors began to worry, and went to check out his grave themselves. They dug it up and found the naked Shinojo cuddled up to Otsuyu's skeleton. It's said that the spirits of Shinojo and Otsuyu could be seen walking around sometimes, although those who saw them would immediately fall ill. Later, a Buddhist priest would exorcise the spirits so that they could rest in peace. So, necrophilia aside, this story is pretty tragic. Watching someone so horribly lonely fall in love, only to find out that the one that they loved was dead, is a bit of a downer. Then seeing them choose to join that person in the afterlife is so heartbreaking. But what does this all mean in context of Yashahime? Well, the easy parallel that I jumped to was Zero being in love with Toga, a person being in love with someone who is long since dead, and wishing to join them. However, she didn't choose the name Shinojo, she chose the name Otsuyu, identifying with the dead girl who is clinging to the living and inviting them to die with her. This is kind of interesting as we don't really see her loving anyone other than Toga. That said, this could also be an inverted telling of the story where Otsuyu, being Zero, is the lonely one herself. As I mentioned though, the story wasn't originally from Japan, and the Chinese version has a slightly different ending. With rather than a Buddhist monk allowing them to rest in peace, a Taoist monk summons people from the underworld to hold them still as he flogs them, and forces them to write confessions to atone for the suffering that they had put on others after they died, then sending them back to the underworld themselves. Rather than being a tragic piece about loneliness and love, it was meant to be a moral piece about how harming people was a crime that justified divine punishment. This version possibly being alluded to in how Zero manipulates and aims to harm those around her, something which will eventually lead to her own downfall. An interesting way that you could look at this is the idea of it being a sort of what-if version of the story, where Otsuyu was allowed to make a wish on the Shikon Jewel. Now, one last thing that I wanted to mention was the time in which Zero is making these claims, saying that she's Otsuyu in the period just before when the story was about to be picked up in Japan. As I said, it became popular in the early 1600s, and much of Yashahime takes place in the 1500s, implying that she might have been the one to bring the story over, or that it was about her. Which both cases I like. But there you have it, the historic and mythological inspiration behind Zero's use of the name Otsuyu, and what I think that it means for her role in the story. If you want to see more videos like this, well, good news. I have a whole playlist of videos talking about the history and yokai behind everything to do with Inuyasha. If you did enjoy this video though, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and maybe even consider checking out my Discord or Patreon. Finally, a big thank you goes out to our Patreon with our Dai Yokai Aikerochu, Jacob Wiley, and Iffy Babes, our Yokai Anel Cruz, Blood Wolfmon, Jamie Heck, Joker Rose, and Lucifina Akuma, and our Hanyo, Anthony Hogan, Ice Wallow Cum, Kiwi Dog, Love the Kiwi, Michael Greyco, Nega Kitty, Samantha Olsen, Savage Camel, and Simon Electric. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, remember to stay excellent.